right, Crowdwork.
Cool. Hello, my name is Connor McDonald. I'm here representing All-Star Studio with Crowdwork. We are the team from Kennesaw State University. We're very excited to be here introducing y'all to our game. What is Crowdwork? We've had some difficulty explaining it in the past. It's kind of a storied concept that takes after games like Mega Man Battle Network and One Step from Eden. But the basic story premise is that you play as a burgeoning stand-up comedian named Earl. He's tasked with exorcising spirits of cynicism that have begun possessing former kings of stand-up comedy. We refer to it as a tactical turn-based RPG. That's a whole lot of words that don't mean a lot. We're kind of working on trying to improve our pitch, but all you need to know is that players attack enemies by telling jokes in kind of a turn-based setting, and then after that they have to avoid enemy attacks on a grid in real time. These are the three key arts of kind of our main characters at the moment. At the left is the stand-up comic Earl. The middle is his mentor, the retired clown Puddles. And on the right is the first possessed king of comedy. His name is Sari Jeinfeld. We were really getting creative with that one. So our main mechanic, obviously this wasn't just going to be a straightforward remake of something like Battle Network. We had to introduce a twist. And we sought to replicate the dynamic between crowds and their audience, crowds and comedians through this system called the Level of Laughs. Essentially, how it works is that if you tell a joke that the crowd is primed to like, the bar will fill. And if you overuse the same kind of joke or tell an inoptimal joke, it'll go down. This kind of does a lot for us on the design end. It allows us to design specific challenges, discourage, quote-unquote optimal play, or encourage niche strategies. The use for the bar is it needs to be partially filled to beat the game in the first place, and you can spend it on supers. So now the meat. What have we been doing for 3 months? What's new? Everything. That's not an exaggeration. For the first couple of weeks, we remade the entire game in Godot. Turns out when you're programming for a game jam, you don't necessarily always consider how scalable your product is. And we had a team member that wanted us to shift to Godot to allow us to accommodate him on programming. So we thought it would be a worthwhile investment, and we saw this as an opportunity to refactor all of our code. We reappointed roles so that members could have their focus more on individual areas, and we implemented new systems for old functions. This included engines to process status effects, persistent tile objects, things like that. Sorry, a lot of words. But the goal, in essence, was to make future development progress faster. We were thinking broader than the scope of this 3-month competition. We were thinking into, if we were still working on this in a year, would our code from the game jam still hold up? And we decided it wouldn't, so we made the appropriate choice. So real substantial changes that aren't just remaking an entire game. What do we do to the gameplay? Let's talk about enemies first. We wanted to give the player a concrete sense of progression. Our Game Jam version, or the version produced after the Game Jam, only had one boss to fight. He was really simple. Now, players have to defeat a myriad of enemies that represent the spirits of cynicism before they are able to approach Mr. Jeinfeld. There are 4 new enemies. They're all different. So they all have their own crafted moveset, designed to get the player thinking about different mechanics. And they have different movement patterns to kind of mix up the enemy. They move at different speeds, a bunch of things like that. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, to even defeat the boss, you have to have the crowd on your side, or you have to have the level of laughs meter filled up. That's also a change that's new. Let's talk about level of laughs. The original version was very basic. It actually didn't do anything. So now it has not a very sophisticated, but a more sophisticated set of rules. It punishes players for essentially overusing jokes. I'm sure you can imagine if you were a real stand-up comic and you stood up there repeating, "Why did the chicken cross the road?" It probably wouldn't be very funny like the 5th time. So, we're trying to encourage the player to diversify what they're using. It's necessary to beat the final boss, and players can spend some of the level of laughs bar to access super jokes. These can be anything from killing an enemy in one hit to regaining a small amount of health or filling the entire board with banana peels to frustrate your enemy. We wanted to make these things that were worth spending meter on. So yeah, that's what's new with the level of laughs. So we took our game to the Columbus Interactive Media Festival. We got some really great feedback, but the one thing that we found was that nobody understood how to play our game. Not a single person. We had to explain it to everybody. So we implemented a tutorial. Players have to complete a tutorial that will not test them, but introduce them to the systems of the game and require them through action to complete certain challenges. We decided to use the mentor character of Puddles. She was yet unutilized, so we decided she would be the perfect person to come in and teach the young Earl the ropes. And there was a lot of dialogue writing that went into that that's really fun to read if you get the chance. Just some odds and ends. Controller support. You can see two of our lovely faces down here. The game works on controller, keyboard, and we demoed on an arcade stick. And you wouldn't believe it, but the arcade stick was the most fun. It works on all of these. We're working on fleshing out maybe how intuitive some of them are, but for right now, people seem to be happy with it. And then new cards. The amount of joke cards, or essentially attacks that you can play, jumped from 5 to 28. And it does anything from, reshuffling your hand to giving you new jokes to giving you more mana to play jokes, to, attacks in weird combinations. An excess of new jokes allows for better player expression, so we thought it was worthwhile to put the time in. UI overhaul. This was a big thing. People thought our initial build was incredibly cluttered, and we wanted to fix that. So some assets are entirely new. The level of laughs meter now has this frame that makes it look a bit like a section of piping in the roofs of the comedy club. The note cards are entirely new. They used to be this really sickly yellowish color. We changed the font to be more readable, obviously. And then there's some readability things. We found out that people actually like knowing what kind of jokes the crowd likes and dislikes, if you can believe it. And then, there's this UI fly in and fly out to indicate when the player's turn is over, and a collapsible control panel just for convenience. And then there's some extra flair stuff, just game over and victory overlays. Art assets. This is going to be kind of a lightning round. I am not an artist, so I don't have a lot to talk about with these, but I just want to show you my team members' gorgeous art. One thing I do want to say is that we take a holistic approach when developing our game. Except for fonts, every single asset in our game is something we made in-house with artistic intention. They're all made by people on our art team or even people not on our art team. And we think that cultivating a unique visual and audio identity helps us stand out and really builds a brand that people can connect with for a long time. Character sprites. There are now 7 characters in total. In addition to adding all the sprites for the new characters, we also redid ones for existing characters to fit within the color palette that we established for the game and bring them more in line with the rest of the cast. So it's 7 sets of character sprites in total. They're all great. They're done by our wonderful pixel artist, Aiden. A new stage. We actually initially had our stage in this perspective view, and while people thought it was interesting, it made reading where attacks were going to come from really difficult, and it made it so that we had to scale sprites depending on where they were on the board. We wanted to put this in an orthographic view, more along the lines of something like One Step from Eden, and that meant redesigning the entire background. It actually went through 2 iterations. This is the final version. And bringing the tiles more in line with an orthographic view, along with shifting more to this blue and purple color scheme that you see becoming like a recurring theme throughout the game. These new tiles also allow for attack warnings to be really readable, and ghosting, which is showing where a player is going to attack. Audio assets. I don't really have them queued up right now, but we went from one song to 9. These include things like title themes, battle themes, victory themes, tutorial themes, a unique theme for the boss, all sorts of stuff. It's really great. They're all currently posted on our Bandcamp page. If you want to check that out, QR code is right here. I would heavily recommend it. It's great. And it also the game also boasts a huge array of sound effects and voice lines. They're all really great. They got a huge laugh out of me. They're all done by our wonderful Foley artist, Josh Miller. Social media. We wanted to establish a social media presence that kind of centralizes itself around artistic merit and audience interaction. So YouTube is kind of where we're going to be hosting major updates for future developments. That's going to be more long-form content, devlogs, things like that. Instagram is mostly for providing followers with kind of a behind-the-scenes look at production and then introducing them to the various characters of the world, running any promotional graphics, stuff like that. And then Bandcamp is a place for hosting the soundtrack because everybody knows if you want your game to be popular, you should probably post the soundtrack somewhere. Or it at least goes a long way. So what's next for us? We have a lot of directions we want to take this game, but these short-term goals are kind of the things that are absolutely necessary and we think are feasible within the next month and a half or so. So our goals for this deadline, or the deadline on April 1st, centered entirely on refining the gameplay systems. So there are some quality of life goals that have gone yet unmet that are absolute necessities. Proper pause screens, start screens, options and settings, revamp victory and loss scenes that give more context to what you're doing, and custom control mapping is something that we really want to provide. Other short-term goals, unique attack animations. These give a lot of character and might motivate players to use certain attacks more. We also want an individual or unique animations for every single super. We had a deck builder that we were working on that didn't quite make the April 1st deadline, but this would have allowed players to select different jokes from a group of all of them and choose a limited amount to go into battle with, which would go a long way towards player expression as well. We want even more cards, even more status effects, and more sophisticated or more varied ways to use the level of laughs meter. Long-term goals. We really thought a lot about our long-term goals, what we want the overall structure of the game to be. We think that goes a long way in selling a vision for the future. We have landed pretty decisively on an RPG-style overworld where the player would go back and forth to different comedy clubs, exercising multiple of the kings of comedy, and then encounter have minor encounters between those clubs, a la, Pokemon or Dragon Quest. And then we also thought it would be a nice touch to either have players be able to use a boss's set of jokes after exercising them, or have that boss just straight up join the team and have there be multiple selectable characters. That one's still kind of up in the air. We want to expand on the narrative. We think there is a lot to talk about with how certain comedians or certain people view comedy and how those views can be warped and cause them to get progressively less funny over time. We think there is a thematic thing to get out there, and we are excited to keep working on writing. And then our big key thing that we want to encourage is player expression. The crux of this game is that a player is interacting with a virtual audience to, essentially participate in a stand-up routine. So we need to give players their own ways of doing that. We wanted a joke crafting system where players can go in and maybe combine different types of jokes or, add different effects and then use those later, or having, like I said, multiple playable characters. So we think these are things that are going to go a long way towards immersing the player in the world. Yeah, here's our credits. Cool.
How easy was it managing a team of that size?
I don't want to say it was easy, but every single person in our team gave 100%, and I think a core part of that was democratizing a lot of our decision making. People on art are allowed to suggest what they think is best for music, and people on music can suggest what they think is best for gameplay. So keeping everybody involved in every aspect of the process and making the end product feel like it belongs to everybody and it's not just one person's vision executed by a bunch of different people. It went a long way towards making sure that people were intrinsically motivated to work on the product. And it's something that I would go so far as to say is the core element of our development group. Yeah.
What was the hardest part about switching?
The question was, what was the hardest part about switching engines? I can't speak to that for everybody. One of our programmers is already a multi-year veteran in Godot, and the other took to it pretty quickly, but I had the most trouble with it. For me, it was just learning GDScript and learning the node system. Those are two things that I'm a Unity user. Shame on me for that. Yeah, so learning like the unique structure and the unique language, it took a lot of work. I wouldn't hesitate to say that it was easy, but now I know 2 game development engines, and I think that's pretty huge. It feels good.
All right, Crowdwork.
Thank you.